So the news is, I think it's wrong to call it the news when it's a little bit of news and a lot of narrative. I feel like we should stop using the word news and maybe even stop using the word fake news, because it's really just narrative. They're trying to interpret the news for you. They're not trying to tell you what it is. You need to put something above the news, such as a rating organization. Now, how would you do it? It'd be hard. But I think if you had enough money behind it and the right people, you could have people who actually, let's say historians, objective people, just looking into it and then scoring things. Here's the pattern that we've been seeing through the Trump administration. Trump will do some policy that has obvious national security implications, such as closing travel from countries where they can't verify easily who you are. And before that, the so-called Muslim ban, before they refined their rule, it was a rule that was bad for those people in those countries, but good for the United States. Basically, it was discriminatory because we weren't going to check people from those countries. We were just going to say, that's a problem country, so we won't let you in. That was the initial stance. Now, America first. He's the president, and he does get to say, I'm going to disadvantage another country to advantage us. That was why he was hired. And you can think of several other examples, immigration, etc., where what he's doing is clearly for national security, but CNN and their ilk report it as white supremacism. So if you're only watching CNN and you see that Trump is making these national security moves, but CNN reports it as obvious white supremacism, what are you going to believe if that's the only news you watch? So the news is, I think it's wrong to call it the news when it's a little bit of news and a lot of narrative. I feel like we should stop using the word news and maybe even stop using the word fake news, because it's really just narrative. They're trying to interpret the news for you. They're not trying to tell you what it is. So then Trump does a national security policy. CNN and their cousins all do turn that into white supremacism. Their public accepts it because it's on this thing called the news. And then you conflate the white supremacists with Q supporters, which are a completely different thing. But of course there's overlap with every group and every other group in this country. So then you turn it into Q supporters, and Republicans are all part of this white supremacist thing, either directly or by tacit support. And then here's the best part. Then CNN blames Trump for dividing the country. It wasn't Trump. Did Trump divide the country by implementing a national security policy that was bad for other countries and their citizens, but good for us? Is that what divided America? No. It was CNN that divided America. And then they placed the blame on Trump, and it got him unelected. How will history even report this? Will history follow the lead of the narrative business that used to be called the fake news, but I'll just call it the narrative business? Will they report that that's what happened, that Trump was divisive and he did all these white supremacist things and he divided the country? Will that actually be the history? Because I didn't see that happen, and I was here. I watched it just like you did. I didn't see that happen. I saw that there are white supremacists, of course. There are bad people everywhere. And what I saw was the news business divide the country. That's all I saw. So we need some kind of a Yelp review for the news. Don't you? Wouldn't you like to see some objective entity whose job it is to do an ongoing report on the quality of the different news organizations? Now you might say to yourself, Scott, that would be so subjective that it would just be nonsense. But I'm not sure it would be. Because I do think you could create a master list of things that are hoaxes according to the left, things that are hoaxes according to the right, and just things that are fact-checked as pure hoaxes, no matter who you are. Wouldn't you like to see a ratio that said how many hoaxes, based on whoever says it's a hoax or not, how many hoaxes every entity buys into? Wouldn't you? Because I haven't done the math, but I will bet you that CNN, MSNBC were about 2 to 3 times the hoax ratio of Fox News, just to pick an example. Now that's anecdotal and subjective and unbiased, so I don't know if that number would hold, but it feels like that. It feels like it was 2 to 1. Now, I'm going to reverse that for the coming administration. In all likelihood, once Trump gets out of the news, however long that takes, once Trump is out of the news, I've got a feeling that Fox News is going to be telling more hoaxes and reporting them as if they're true. Because that's the way it goes. Whoever's in power, the news entity that's opposite of that ends up having to create a lot of hoaxes because the real news isn't bad enough, right? So, but I'd like to see some kind of a Yelp industry, because otherwise the news has control of the citizens. You need to put something above the news, such as a rating organization. Now, how would you do it? It'd be hard. But I think if you had enough money behind it and the right people, you could have people who actually, let's say historians, objective people, just looking into it and then scoring things. And maybe you have judges, and maybe you have, let's say you had a dozen judges, and they scored every story for whether it's a hoax or it's true or it's misleading. And then you just report what the vote was from the 12 people who were pretty objective. I don't know, I think we need that more than anything.